All right. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Incredible Paul Podcast. I'm Paul Faronbi, aka Incredible Paul. Super excited for this conversation we are having live here with my friend and co-founder of Wonsulting, Jonathan Javier, Forbes 30 Under 30. Just a little bit about you. How about you introduce yourself the way you would do it?
Yes, thank you, Paul, for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm very excited for this initiative. I'm Jonathan. I'm one of the co-founders of Wonsulting, where we help people land jobs coming from underdog backgrounds. I previously worked at Snapchat, Google, Cisco before pursuing my passions of helping people land jobs coming from their very non-traditional backgrounds. And besides that, I create a lot of content on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and more as Jonathan Words of Wisdom, where I teach a lot of educational type content, experiments, and storytelling videos. Very excited to be here and happy to see all of the incredible people in the audience.
I see what you did there with the incredible people. So he shouted you out, all you in the audience. Want to make sure we keep you engaged. So there's a chat there. If you all have questions, please drop them in there. I'll be checking them. We're going to try to keep this conversation as interactive as possible. But the whole idea behind this is trying to talk about turning underdogs into winners, moving from rejection into redirection, which I know that's something you've said multiple times. So I'm just curious, like, how did you come up with that moniker of rejection to redirection? When was the first time you heard that or came up with?
The first time that it came to mind of rejection is redirection was like 2019, 2020, when I was applying to many different jobs that I thought that I was qualified for, and I would still get rejected from them despite having Snapchat and Google on my resume. But I always look at different things that happen in life with a positive outcome or outlook. So I told myself, even though I was rejected by these companies, and many people probably feel the same way of, shoot, I take one step back. At the end of the day, you have to take 5 to 6 steps forward. So having that positive outlook, especially on the job search, is important because there are going to be times where you do get rejected, whether it's during the application stage or the final round. But the most important thing is, how do you keep on pushing and pushing to the limits that you have? And if you're able to do that, you're eventually going to land a job in 3 to 6 months, realistically.
Absolutely. You have to keep pushing. I think it's really interesting. So you said it happened in 2019. So right when One Salting started is right when you came up with that moniker.
That's right. That's right. And it came about because there are many situations that people will fall into with their backgrounds. For example, maybe you went to an Ivy League school, or maybe you have an uncle that works at your, in quotations, dream company or a company you're interested in. And it's much easier for you to get a job there compared to someone who doesn't go to a target school or who requires certain obstacles that they need to face, whether it's like H-1B, which many people have been facing, many of our clients have been facing, many of our users, or it's, for example, you don't have the necessary experiences that might deem you as a qualified candidate. Well, why that model is so important is because truly you have to look at rejections as simply learnings, and using those learnings to iterate towards a better strategy to get you a job.
Absolutely. Looking at them as learnings. I like to say that the only L's I take are lessons. So definitely the learnings, because we take L's sometimes, but it's like what you're talking about is that reframing of it is to like learning from it as opposed to getting stuck on the failure side of things. I think that that's really cool.
Definitely. And I was going to mention that those learnings are so important because I apply it to for Wonsulting now. I don't ever say we have failures. I just say they're areas of opportunities because they truly are areas of opportunity to learn and grow. And if we only focus on the failures that we have, then we're going to have this very negative mindset, which will put us in the gap rather than us looking at the gain of all the experiences that we've had.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and that whole reframing of like the failures and what's going on, there's a question that got dropped in the chat that I see around like sometimes you feel like you connect really well with a hiring manager or maybe with the team and you don't get a response a few days later. So I'm wondering if you have stories of maybe you felt like we did really well, you connect with the team, but then it was ghost mode. How did you approach that?
Yes. I had this situation happen where I made it to the final round of a very popular tech company and I got rejected without even knowing why. I'll tell this story. It was about 6 years ago, and I was interviewing for one of my favorite companies out there, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an incredible company, as you all know. I always advocate for utilizing it to network with people, whether you can find different hiring managers or recruiters. And I remember going through 4 rounds of interviews. Imagine yourself going through 4 rounds of interviews and it takes 3 to 4 weeks. Crazy, right? And I remember during the final round interview, I had about 3 hours of interviews with the hiring manager, with two of the team members, and then another person on an adjacent team. I thought that things went really well. When I spoke with them, they were excited. They said that I was a candidate that they truly enjoyed speaking to because truly showed that I had a passion for utilizing LinkedIn and for the role. As I was waiting a few days later, I got a little bit anxious because I said to myself, well, why haven't they gotten back to me yet? And I followed up day after day. And at first, I thought that was bothering them. But in fact, I don't think I was. So I followed up 3 to 4 times. And finally, the recruiter said, oh, we have an update for you. And it seemed positive. She had a very positive tone in the email, so I assumed that it would be an offer.
Mm.
I was working at Google at the time. I stepped outside of the office for about 5 minutes, very excited, a smile on my face. I was so excited because I said to myself, okay, I'm going to go to a company that I really enjoy. I hop on the call, and the first thing that she says is, Jonathan, thank you for your time. I really appreciate that you took time to interview with us. And then the words that everybody knows. Unfortunately, we actually went with another candidate. And when I heard that, my heart sank because I really thought that everything went well and there's nothing that would have put me against not getting that offer. I didn't know exactly why I didn't get the offer. I just blamed myself because I said, oh, I probably messed up in an interview. It was probably because I didn't answer a question right. But I soon found out years later that it wasn't necessarily because of the answers or about my experiences. It was just because there was one other candidate that was better and more qualified. And that's going to happen a lot to people on their job search. You'll reach the end that you think is going to be the end, and you'll be candidate number two. And it's tough because you're like, wow, like if I was just one person more, I wouldn't have a silver medal. When in reality, those things will happen, but it's how we react to those that make us different. So, example, for that case, after that happened, I stayed in touch with the recruiter and I found another role that I was qualified for. And I reached out to that same recruiter and she introduced me to another recruiter who then gave me an interview for a role at LinkedIn. I didn't pursue the role at LinkedIn. I instead went to Cisco at a different role. But all in all, what I'm trying to say is that even if you make a final round, even if you get an interview process, it's important to stay in touch with the recruiters and hiring managers you connect with because you never know what other opportunities might arise. And then you can take that rejection into a redirection into another position or opportunity.
That's a really cool story. I like how I could just feel the emotions of being in that where like you are really big on LinkedIn, really big on all social platforms. But I know, at least I feel like LinkedIn is one of your favorites. And then to think that, hey, I'm actually going to be able to work on this platform and then not getting it, but then realizing that you were still able to stay connected. And some of the strategies that you talk about all the time that we share at Wonsulting is continuing to network with people because you never know. Because sometimes, at least in this case, they follow up with you and they let you know that they weren't moving forward. I've heard of some cases where sometimes they just ghost even after the final interview. So just keeping that fortitude and to keep moving, I think is really powerful.
And to add there too is sometimes when they ghost you, you don't don't take it personal because sometimes people get busy and I understand that they do get busy. So sometimes they can't respond. In a perfect world, I wish every person who went through an interview process would get a response from a big corporate company. But unfortunately, that's not the case. However, that's what we're trying to change, especially at Wonsulting. How do we make the process more transparent? I think is extremely important because it gives the candidates or the job seekers more confidence in continuing to apply to jobs, continuing to pursue what goals and areas of opportunity and jobs they truly want to go for.
Absolutely. That transparency is really huge. So I'm looking at some of the other questions in the chat. So there's one, I think this is a pretty quick question to ask. Kind of balance between giving quick, snappy answers in interviews versus like full length details, keeping in mind that it's like a shorter interview. How have you approached that in the past while you're interviewing?
Yes, it's a great question. Now, the most important thing about answering interview questions is you need to make sure you're actually answering the question and you want to make sure that you are understanding the question correctly. So, a way that I like to do it is, of course, many people and we at Consulting advocate for using STAR method, which is situation, task, action, result. But if you are in an interview and you don't truly understand what they're looking for, you should ask them a question about the question they asked. Hey, here's a perfect example. Like if they ask a question about your problem solving skills and how you utilized it to create a solution, if you don't know exactly what they're looking for, you can ask them a follow up question to understand, okay, are you looking for a situation that happened during work? Are you looking for a situation that happened in my past experience with exposition? And that's important because then you can answer the question very concisely in a way where you're actually answering what they're looking for. Because many people will go straight into answering the question, but they're not necessarily answering the real question that the answer that they're looking for. So, all in all, I do think that more clear and concise, straightforward answers are more important. Unless they clearly say, oh, tell me a story about how you did this, then you can go on tangent. But you want to make sure that you are answering questions maximum 2 minutes. It's very important because if you just trail off and talk too much, then you might not be able to get asked all the questions that the person on the other side wants to ask you.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I often coach clients to make it a conversation as much as possible. And I think it's kind of like I don't know if power trip is the right word for it, but to create the dynamic, everyone wants to have a conversation. Interviews can feel overburdening. I know like interviewers can get nervous as well, as much as the interviewee. If you make it a conversation and you ask those questions, clarifying questions, like you said, it makes the whole interview go a whole lot better.
Yes. And another thing that people don't know is that you can ask recruiters, hiring managers, whoever you're interviewing with before the interview, if you have their emails or whoever sent you the email, you can ask them what questions you should prepare for before the interview. Now, again, in an ideal world, you already know the questions. At Consulting, we give basically most of the questions before the interview so people are prepared. And I think it's just very important to do that because when you're able to do that, then you know beforehand so you can prepare. And if they don't give it to you, then it's fine. At least you asked.
No, for sure. So we got some questions coming in. We'll come back to that, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into your story first because I know you used to share a lot about it, like at the beginning of Wonsulting, and I just want to talk me through like even kind of the mindset of starting Wonsult even back then versus now. Like, did you already see the vision of Wonsulting what it looks like today, or kind of talk me through what you saw?
You know, if I'm being honest, if you ask me, well, what does Consulting look like in 5 years in 2019? I probably wouldn't have an answer to the question because all I wanted to do was just help people. And I did it because I was at Google. There weren't a lot of people who came from very similar backgrounds as me. So I said to myself, how do I start something to help people get the information necessary to break into these companies? And then that's when I started doing workshops literally every day and helping people. And now, 2025, we now have 25 employees. I think we have 20 plus contractors, career coaches, etc. on the team. So the team has truly expanded to a point where I've honestly just hired great people. And I think that's very important in any company. When you hire great people who are smarter than you, who have a lot more experience than you in particular fields that they're truly passionate about, I think that helps any business or company tremendously because it builds a culture around leadership and around the team that creates autonomy, right? So, and another thing is, I think also bringing on an incredible co-founder that is Jerry, that really complements the different skills that I have versus what he has is so important for building any company because it holds yourself accountable to a very high standard, similar to how job search is. Many people will go on their job search alone, and that's fine, right? But I do think instead of going alone on their job search, it's important to join a community or do it with someone. That's why for us, we have our job search program, our little boot camp that we have, where we have a bunch of job seekers who are in the Discord channel who are together helping each other get those opportunities. Because if one person wins, everybody wins.
Absolutely. Having that community is so critical, and just trying to stay positive because the career search is more of a marathon. It's not a sprint. It doesn't always go as quickly as you want it to. And so there was a question in here around like staying positive and how you're able to do that when you're getting rejections or when things are not going. Like, do you have any tips or tricks or
Yeah, that's a great question. Every day, and I'll show everybody this real quick, is every day I will write 3 wins that I had in a day and 3 wins that I want tomorrow. And why this is important is because I realize that in today's society or in the past, that many people will focus on negative things that happen in their lives, and that will then impact the way that they see the world in terms of a pessimistic mindset. Now, again, I'm not trying to promote toxic positivity or anything like that. I am trying to promote more of a gain opportunity rather than a gap. And how I explain this is very simple, Paul. For example, let's say that someone is applying to just making this up, Google. Now, Google is an opportunity I call it a 10x opportunity because that's a company that everybody wants to work for. It's a top company. It's a company that has a 2% acceptance rate, 1 to 2%, whatever it is. And many people will apply to those jobs, thousands of people, right? So if you go and try to strive to go for that company and you don't hit, then let's just say you take in quotations a step down to a mid-level size company. You've still improved significantly by 5, 6x. Maybe you didn't do 10x, but you still did 5 to 6x. Now imagine instead you were in a gap mindset. You said, okay, well, I'm just going to apply to this company that's not paying me the number that I want because you don't feel as confident that you can get anything else. Now you'll go for that, and let's say you get rejected from it, or let's say you don't get that opportunity. If you take a step down from that, you're only improving yourself by 1x. So why I'm saying this is because when you try to go for 10x, 8x opportunities, whatever it is, an opportunity that's really big, and if you're not able to get it, it's okay. Then you can go back down a little bit and you're still on a 5x, 6x opportunity because you truly improved yourself rather than saying, okay, I'm only having a 2x mindset. I'm just going to go for a company that's paying me a little bit more or paying me a little bit less than what I'm making right now. And I think that's very important in today's where job market, people are saying that it's bad, that it's crap, that there's more unemployment. It's true. But in fact, I think one of the most important things is the new year's coming up. So new budgets are going to happen. And when new budgets happen, more people are hiring.
absolutely. I think that's a good point is just shifting that mindset, understanding that it is a brand new year coming. And like a lot of times at this point, budget's already spent, but they're looking at for next year. So that's something to keep in mind. I also want to come back to what you said at the beginning with the toxic positivity. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think sometimes like we're like, yeah, just stay positive and all these things, but it's good to stay positive and have a good mindset, but that doesn't mean ignoring what are the things that are going on. It's really like narrowing your focus. Like what you shared real time there. I could tell that you, because I didn't plan this question, but you already had it in front of you, which means it's something you did regularly of like the 3 things, your 3 wins and the 3 things you want to win the next day or going forward. I think that's just a really it's positive, but just a really helpful thing to do because it's really what you're focused on that grows and that's what develops. And that whether that's in your current job or in the job search, I think that's really key. And so there was a question in here and then I guess it's more a specific question to how you even go about applying to different jobs. Like let's say you're already applied to a job at a company and they're kind of maybe slower in the interview process and you're still waiting to hear back. Is it okay to apply at other jobs in the company? Like maybe there's experiences you can share either at LinkedIn or where you work at Snapchat and Google. Because I know that you shared a lot about having rejections multiple times before breaking in. What was that approach? How did you do that?
Yeah, well, I applied to multiple jobs at companies, and I think it's very important that you should do the same because when you do that, then there's more opportunities for you to break in. I don't think a company will be like, "Oh, well, why did Paul apply to 5 different positions at my company?" No company will question that unless, for example, you apply to a sales analyst role and then you apply to an engineering role. They have not really much transferable skills. But if you say, for example, you apply to an operations analyst, you apply to a sales operations analyst, and then you apply to a business analyst, those three are very adjacent industries. So it's totally fine to do that. Now, the thing is when you do that, it's important to understand that, again, maybe you won't get an interview for each of those specific positions, but what happens is you now have a pool of more opportunities in your back pocket. Just in case one doesn't get back to you, you might still be in 2 interview processes. Then when you go through those 2 interview processes, if they find out you're interviewing for 2 roles, it's totally fine. The company will typically ask you, well, which one are you most interested in? Are you most interested in this one or this one? And then you can just clarify the opportunity. So again, I would not discourage people from applying to multiple jobs at the same company. You definitely can. And this, I think what's more important is, and I've seen this a lot with some of our own people part of our program, what happens is many people will get to the final round and they think they're going to get the offer, so they stop applying to other jobs. But what happens is sometimes there's things out of your control from that person giving you an offer. So it's important to still continue applying to jobs because you want to just make sure that you have multiple offers on the table. So then when someone says, "Hey, Paul, I have an offer for you," you have 3 offers that you can consider, and then you can use them to negotiate even higher compensation if possible, especially for the big companies. Small companies already might have a budget that they have set in place, totally fine. But the bigger companies, something small in the corporation's eyes, a small bonus or a small bump in compensation should not be as big of a problem.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Just understanding like just the bump in compensation as opposed to other routes is really good point. So there's been you all are asking really great questions. Some are more specific questions that I think we could answer pretty quickly in the chat. So I'm trying to keep a focus on ones that are lead to like more of a conversation. Just for those of you, I see those questions, but I'm not I'm not ignoring you. But there's just some questions in here around networking. Like, how do you really approach that? Like, are you able to stand out? I know we talk a lot about LinkedIn, and then I guess it's like probably more of a shout out to Jonathan Words of Wisdom, like some of the content you post about never missing an opportunity to network with people, like where you're at different events. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what are some effective strategies for networking, whether it is LinkedIn or other places? Because we focus a lot on LinkedIn, but I think sometimes people forget that LinkedIn is one way to network and you can do other things as well.
Great question about networking. I think networking is important. Networking, again, you don't need to network, but it is a positive thing that you can do to help you land opportunities that might not be there compared to just applying to jobs on sites. Doing one is good, doing both is better. Now, in terms of networking, the philosophy that I have about networking is that everybody has the opportunity to do it, but comes the question of how will you be different than everybody else? What you see online is many people will say, go reach out to people. Say you're from this university, say you work in the same industry. It's great. It's advice that I've honestly shared probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that was important back then because back then, not as many people were networking on LinkedIn. Now everybody's networking on LinkedIn. So then goes back to my question, how do you stand out when networking with people? I think there are a couple different things to identify when you reach out to someone that will make sure that you network effectively. Number one, I think it's important for us to embrace our personal backgrounds, whether it's our ethnicities, whether it's how we identify ourselves, and different organizations that we're a part of. Why that's important is because, let me give you an example. Let's say that you are on H-1B. Again, I'm just talking about H-1B as an example. If you're on H-1B, and let's just say you're from India, and you moved to the United States, you took your master's in university here, let's just say Emory University, and you reach out to someone who went to Harvard, who does not come from an H-1B background, and you ask them, hey, help me get a job. What do you think the response will be? It's probably going to be very little responses. And the reason being is because you just don't understand you. They don't understand the struggles that you've been through as an H-1B student in America. But if you go to someone who, let's just say they went to IIT, I think IIT is the university, or Delhi University in India, they moved to the US, they went to, let's just say they went to University of Texas at Austin, their master's, and then now they work at a company you're interested in, and you know they're on H-1B, and you reach out to them. Who's going to have a better chance of responding to you? The first or the second? Probably the second, because the second understands you. You're similar backgrounds as them. You're both from India. You're both from H-1B. The other person doesn't understand your story. They can't empathize with you as much. Why I'm sharing that is because we need to embrace our cultures and our backgrounds in that way to then identify opportunities, because if those people have done it, you can too. But you see how I changed that mindset of, instead of reaching out to someone getting rejected and it's a random person, I instead try to target the exact people that I'm really interested in. So that's number one. Number two, I think what's really an interesting way that I haven't really shared as much online, but I'll tell people here because you're a part of the community, is content creators or people who post on LinkedIn love, well, I'm saying love because they do. They love when you mention their post when you're connecting with them. People love it. I'll tell you my story. I loved it. I mean, I still love it. But 5 years ago, when I was first starting, people reach out to me. Some people would just say, hey, I want to connect. I would connect with them, but so many people were messaging me. But if someone was like, hey, John, I saw your post about this. I really liked it because of XYZ, then I'm more inclined to send a message back because you took time to actually look at a post that I did. Same way with everybody here. If you see any professional who is making content or has posted something and you actually enjoyed the piece of content, I'd reach out and just be their support person. Be like, hey, I really enjoyed this piece of content. Looks incredible. I'd love to connect. I think that's a really easy way to actually connect with someone and then have thoughtful conversation after.
No, I like that a lot because I think a lot of times with what you mentioned, like with networking and really connecting with people, is just finding the common ground. I think we and it's really easy in the job search. We want a job, we want to be able to work at a company, a specific place, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, like we're still connected with another human, another person, and you need to find that sort of connection and instead of just connecting for the sake of I want a job, which you obviously do, but finding that commonality. And I like what you mentioned about like content creators and different people posting on LinkedIn. But I'm sure you've noticed this, but I think most of them will tell you that a lot of people don't do that. Like, first of all, they might not send a personalized invite at all. So you just raise yourself above the crop by doing that. And then other people might say, oh, I need a job or I need this. Few people mention their posts. And then if you like, maybe you even follow them for a while, you mentioned like a couple posts, that might be another thing that you mentioned. But anytime you can find an opportunity to highlight the value that someone is bringing for you, like you're going to connect with them very easily. But it needs to be authentic, but it's going to help you connect.
100%. It shouldn't be transactional. I think what's important is that, and someone said here, how do you make sure it doesn't feel like a barter system? Is that most times when someone you reach out, you're trying to get something for yourself, but it's never the other way around. It's never the other way of how can I support you? And I think that's so important in this day and age to ask people how you can support them. And then in the future, they're going to be like, well, how can I support you? And then that's when you have your ask. I think it's extremely important, especially with so many people reaching out nowadays.
Yeah, a lot of people are reaching out and just finding a way to stand out.
Yes, 100%. And one other thing, Paul, I will mention is that if anybody here truly wants to stand out, I think what we have to look at is there is a misconception that you should apply to more jobs to get more interviews, which is true, of course. It's actually true. Of course, you're gonna if you apply to more jobs, you apply 100 jobs, you're gonna probably get more interviews. Is it gonna lead to more offers? It's debatable. I actually believe, and this might be controversial, is that if you have top 5 companies in mind that are startup or medium-sized company, and you go really deep into the interview process to make sure you stand out, you will get an offer from at least one. I'll tell a quick story real quick. I just hired for an operations team lead for our full service apply to jobs. We just hired her, which is great. I also just hired for another position, a CX manager position, which is great. And there are about 100 plus applicants for each person or for each role. And I looked at all the applications. I interviewed everybody, or not everybody. I interviewed like 5, 10 people. The 1 to 2 people that stood out actually created a deck or created something that was really deep to understand that the problems that we were facing from a CX side and how we would solve them. And they actually presented it during one of the interviews. Now, again, I'm not saying to do that for every company, but imagine you being that one person for a smaller, medium-sized company that does that compared to everybody else. You'll be the one that stands out. And sure, if you get rejected for it, still with that, it's still good learning. Because then imagine, let's just say you create a LinkedIn post on it and you say, hey, I made this project for this one. I got rejected, but if any other companies are hiring, let me know. Well, then guess what? Maybe someone else will pick it up and say, wow, this is an incredible project. I'd love to interview you. Again, this is a mindset change, but it's something to consider. Once you get an interview, how do you go deep into making sure that you truly get that offer that stands out compared to everybody else?
Absolutely. Going that extra mile. I think that that's really huge because what you're signaling to the company is you are basically already doing the job. So it's like, well, yeah. I didn't know if you're about to say that. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say 100%. And like during the interview process, the company is gonna ask you questions because those are problems that they're currently dealing with. And I think it's important to, if you want to be an active listener to show the company, is if you do something like that, you'll truly stand out. Again, I wouldn't say do it for, I mean, you could do it for a big corporation. Large corporations, though, are kind of like you don't have as much autonomy. Let's be real. You get paid a lot, but you don't have as much autonomy. And maybe they won't see it as much. But if a smaller company like Wonsulting, if someone did that, I'm being serious. If someone did that and I was hiring for a role, I'd be like, what the heck? I'm gonna interview you, like regardless of your experiences. Again, that just might be my personal opinion, but hopefully it's an opinion that other people can take into account.
I would say it's not just your personal opinion because I've been told that even like with in larger companies that even for internal movements or external movements, those people that go the extra mile, like there's a lot of competition and a lot of times like even in the job search, just talking with people is there's a lot of things outside of your control that you can't control, but you can control how you show up and how you can signal to the employer that you can do the job. And also, there's this aspect of like the culture fit too, because I think sometimes maybe you can share more about this. That I think some people are I don't know if afraid, maybe they're hesitant to bring a little bit of personality into an interview. They're kind of really rigid, just answering the questions. They're coming back to what we said earlier about even asking follow up or clarifying questions. And that makes it harder for the employer to actually see you in the job because it feels really robotic.
Exactly.
I see a few different questions here. I saw a couple questions about the overall like this the slowdown around the holidays. Our company's still hot hiring right now. How to approach that? If you got any thoughts or questions around, yeah, thoughts around that.
I mean, I just hired like this past weekend.
Yeah.
So again, maybe I'm just an outlier in terms of recruiting, but I do think companies are still hiring. And I know that the news sometimes scares job seekers where it's like, shoot, there's no more jobs out there. But if you look on job boards, any job board, LinkedIn, Indeed, I know I say LinkedIn, Indeed. There's other sites that I always mention, Job Board AI, our job board. There are many different companies still hiring for roles. Now, again, maybe the amount of jobs that are out there are smaller by a certain percentage, which they are according to a lot of the data that we see from the US Bureau. But there are still companies hiring because number one, companies are hiring to prepare for the new year. For example, I'm hiring a full-time career coach because I'm hiring now because I know in January we're going to have a bunch of clients. So I'd rather hire them now, onboard them, so then in January they're ready. If I hire them in January, then they're going to be 3, 4 weeks behind. We're going to have a bunch of clients. And guess what? Now our services are delayed. Why I'm sharing that perspective is because, again, people can debate, oh, yeah, you have their new budgets come about, which is true. New budgets do come about in January. So there's going to be new positions that are hiring. But also, budgets need to be allocated or utilized by the end of the year. So it's still their companies are hiring right now because they're trying to get rid of their budgets or use as much budgets as possible if before the year ends, because if they don't, then they're going to lose it. All in all, I think it's important for everybody to recognize that companies are still hiring, jobs are still out there. Yes, the job market is in quotations bad because there's a lot of layoffs that are occurring. Many people are going, again, out of their companies, being laid off, are now unemployed, but there are still positions out there and people need to recognize that.
Absolutely. There's still positions out there. And I think because of that, some people are not being as proactive or not, they're letting the news kind of prevent them and inhibit them from taking action. So I think if you have that mindset and like, hey, there's still jobs out there, I can still get a job. I think you're going to be right there at the top because just coming into different interviews, like sometimes people are just setting themselves back because they're already defeated in a way. And I think it just comes down to like, what is the mindset you're bringing in? What do I have to bring to the table? I think that's something like for those on here who have career coaches at Wonsulting, I think that's something you can have those conversations with your career coach in that interview prep session. It's like, hey, like, how am I coming across? Like, am I coming off confident or not? And then maybe you don't have a career coach, like check out Wonsulting AI, like with the interview AI. Like I think that's a good tool that if maybe you're not able to get a career coach, I think interview AI is also a great option as well. But just making sure that you have a way to know how you're showing up, because if you just rely on yourself, it's not going to be the best approach to know if you're actually improving.
Most definitely. And you should be definitely critical with yourself when you're going through these interviews or practicing, because the most honest feedback will leverage yourself to another level. And another thing to mention is that if anybody here gets an interview, that means that they like you, that you're qualified, you're better, you did better than the other 95% of people who applied to the job. Now it's just up to you to verify the information that you have on your resume and just showcase those experiences in a word form rather than written.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start to wrap these up in like the last 5 minutes or so, but there are some things, and it kind of came down to what you were talking about, like with the interview process. Because I'll kind of like loop this into one, but it's kind of like the same question about like some people are not getting interviews. They're trying to figure out how to get the first round interview, or like they're getting the first or second round interview, how to progress, and then maybe they're getting to the final round. I'm pretty sure you've talked about this before, but just for the audience to try to talk through what are the potential things that are going on to know what you need to focus based on like, oh, I'm not getting interviews, or I'm getting interviews, only make the first or second round, or I'm getting the final round.
Yes. You know, it's so interesting. The interview rate that's on average is 2%. 2% interview rate for jobs you apply to. That's the average, common average. But whenever I see again, like these sessions are typically for we have the weekly group calls.
Hmm.
We have like 10, 15 people who will say they're in interviews already, which is
Hmm.
great. So that's like 20% interview rate, which is
Hmm.
incredible, I will say. Now, to get an interview, I think one of the most important things is, again, people will say different things, but I truly believe it's either a resume problem or you're applying to the wrong job problem. if you're not getting interviews. Now, the reason why I say this is because, for example, let's just say that you apply to a job and you are a entry level technical analyst, but then you apply to a senior technical analyst that requires 3+ years experience. You're probably not going to get an interview. Let's get real, because you don't meet the minimum qualifications. Now, if you meet the minimum qualifications and you fit 80% of the preferred qualifications, you should apply to the job, because then you still have a good chance of landing an interview. That's why we say for our full service apply to jobs, we'll apply to jobs right away, because then you have a better chance of landing interviews because you apply to jobs faster. That's another thing. Applying to jobs as quickly as possible is important. Someone asked about, should you tailor your resume per job description? I mean, if you have time, but if it's not in your top 10, you don't necessarily need to, because the job positions should be very similar to each other. An operations analyst at Facebook should be very similar to an operations analyst at Google. So why I say it's an application problem is because people will apply to the wrong jobs. That's it. That's literally the reason why. And they won't apply to jobs where they fit most of the minimum qualifications, not, I mean, all, right? Or at most of the preferred qualifications. Number two, your resume, meaning you need to make sure your position matches up for the role that you're going for. I'll give an example. I was just hiring for that operations team lead, and I noticed that 80% of people who applied did not even have any operations experience, or they titled it as something else. And another thing, again, I'm just for transparency, is the person that I hired, actually their first role on their resume was a sales role. But I honestly didn't see that they had a director of operations role at the bottom of their resume. When I saw that, I was like, oh, shoot, actually they have operations experience. Now, why I'm mentioning that is because you don't want to be that person who you get missed out on because your most recent experience or an experience that you have is nothing related to the job you're applying for. So you need to make sure your resume is optimized in a way where it's relevant to the role that you're applying to. And the way to do this is, again, people are not going to say this, people are not going to tell you this, but you should embellish the truth, as I like to say. Now, again, I'm not saying blatantly lie. Like, don't lie. Like, don't say, hey, I'm an engineer when you're a product manager. And yeah, obviously, it's too different.
Yeah.
But like, let's just say you're an operations analyst at Cisco, but you actually did sales operations and product sales. Let's just say sales analysis and product ops. I'm saying that because that's exactly what I put on my resume, because that's what I actually did. The position I was given as operations analyst, but what I did was sales analytics and product operations. Now, that makes me look like a qualified candidate, because then the company that I'm applying to, if they're hiring for a sales analyst role, they see that I have worked in a sales analyst experience. But if they saw operations analyst, they would have been like, oh, operations analyst is different than sales analyst. So again, I think those are very non-traditional strategies that people typically don't share, but I think that it's important to utilize during these application phases, and that'll help you get some more interviews.
Absolutely. I definitely agree on that because like it's shown like I know through our content you've probably seen it like where recruiters and hiring managers are looking on the resume, it's on the top. And if you don't have something on there that caters to it, it can get tossed pretty quickly. And then the other side of it that you're mentioning it, like if you're getting interviews, your resume is good, then you just are focusing on that interview process. And that's where getting those reps in, whether it's with a career coach, through different AI tools, whoever it is, those reps are important to make sure you are fine tuning your skills. Because at that point, your resume doesn't matter as much once you're in the interview process. You need to actually showcase you know it.
100%. And one last thing I want to mention is there are always different ways of how you can go about your job search. And there's different strategies that you can utilize compared to other people. Now, again, other people will have different strategies that work for them. For example, I know in our weekly group call, there's 3 different types of people that came last time. Number one, there's someone who said they applied to a bunch of jobs, landed 3 interviews, and they applied to it. There's another person who said that they got like 4 interviews. I remember 3 or 4. It was all inbound from LinkedIn. And another person, they said they got an interview because they got recommended by a friend and they got an interview. Now, why I'm sharing this is because there's no linear path in strategy to get a job. If one strategy does not work for you, you simply move on to the next strategy. And why it's important to adjust your strategy is because if you don't adjust your strategy and you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results. If applying to jobs doesn't work for you, try getting recommended by someone on the team or referral, whatever it is. Try that, see if it works. Once you see that something works, then you go, I call it 10x, you 10x it. So you keep doing it because you know it works. For example, I wouldn't tell someone, let's just say that you applied to 100 jobs, you got 0 interviews. But let's say you reached out to 20 people and you got 5 interviews. I wouldn't tell them to keep applying to jobs. Sure, you can apply to jobs, not 100, but 20. I would just reach out to more people because you know it works. I think that's so important in job search is because, again, if you all are doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, you won't get different results. You need to make sure you adjust. And that's why it's important to go to those weekly group calls because I, myself, and Jerry, and we'll probably have more, will help you adjust your strategy to lead to more interviews and an offer, of course.
Absolutely. Those weekly group calls are really important. I know we took one of those spots this time. They'll be back to a regularly scheduled program next week and moving forward. And yeah, as we wrap things up, just appreciate all the engagement for people in the chat. We weren't able to get to all the questions, but I think we got a majority of them. So if there's things that you haven't got answered, that's what this Discord group is for. Definitely drop those questions in. Either Fernando or Jason will be able to help answer those questions, and then maybe we'll follow up on them for sure.
Also, there's a lot of people who attended this first live session. If you all want more of these, type in the comments what you want to see next. We'd love to get your feedback because, again, we're trying to create so many more resources for all of you, a lot of these different initiatives to help you during these times. And I think it's so important we all come together to help all of you. All we ask is once you get those interviews and offers, share it in the Discord channel, share it with your coach if you're part of our program. Let them know so we can help you get even more. And I think that's so important because if you're an underdog, you can turn into a winner, and we're able to help you get that true dream opportunity that you've always wanted.
Absolutely. I know Jason's been leading a lot more stuff catered to like resume interview, all the career stuff. I'll be doing more of the, I guess, expanding on interviewees, bringing people in just that are in, not so necessarily in the job search, but can speak to the job search. So excited for who we'll be having on for next month. So it'll be on December 3rd. We're going to be finalizing a time for that. So have Linda Lee coming. So she's already
That's
agreed.
right. Everybody knows Linda Lee, Linda
Yeah.
Le, one of
Yeah.
our good friends. She's a huge LinkedIn content creator. She has 2x more followers than me. She's going to be joining. So again, everybody reach out to Paul. If y'all can find Paul on LinkedIn, reach out to him, give him some suggestions, give him some feedback. You're iterating accordingly, and we're gonna help as much as we can.
Yeah, for sure. I'll drop my link to in the Discord. So definitely go in there. Let me know who you want to see more of. What do you want to see more of? These sessions are going to be more story-based, podcast-based. We'll definitely want to answer your questions specific to the job search, but I know Jason and other sessions will be more catered directly to the job search, but we want to get you so exposure to other people, like other people that have more followers than Jonathan, which I didn't even think that was possible, but some people that have more followers than him, as well as we'll try and get recruiters and hiring managers on here as well, get some exposure. And we'll just go from here. We'll continue to iterate. So definitely go to the Discord. I will have that in there, the link to my profile. And let's stay connected. Let's keep iterating. Let's keep learning, and let's keep being incredible. Thank you all for joining.